Chapter 193 The Catacombs. Without wasting any time, Nephi silently jumped into the crevice. Just before she did, white flames ignited in her eyes. The darkness swallowed her live figure whole, like the maw of some unknown creature. Damn it all! With a resentful expression on his face, Sonny stepped forward. However, before he could approach the crevice, Castor inadvertently blocked his path. A moment later, the proud legacy was gone too. Sonny lingered for a moment, and then looked back. He wanted to check if Cassie needed help going down, but he didn't have to worry. Kai was already gently holding her in his arms. The charming archer softly rose into the air, hovered there for a second, and then glided into the darkness. Sonny blinked a couple of times and shook his head. Show off. Effie soon followed the rest of the party, taking her radiant memory with her. Left alone in the darkness, Sonny shivered, wrapped himself in the shadow, and jumped down. He fell for a few seconds and then landed on hard stone, the impact sending a painful tremor through his bones. Standing up, Sonny found himself in a narrow tunnel. Its walls were made out of weathered stone, clearly put there by human hands. The rest of the cohort was already there, preparing for battle. Nephis had summoned her silver longsword. Because the tunnel was not wide enough to freely use it, she was holding it with both hands. One armored gauntlet rested on the hilt, while the other was on the blade itself, halfway to its tip. Castor was wielding a sword too. However, his was a graceful jian with beautiful patterns etched on its blade, with a triangular guard carved out of green jade. Sonny didn't know what was the tier of that memory, but he knew that it was extremely powerful. He had seen it cut through flesh, bone, and steel alike. Currently, the jian was emanating a ghostly green light. Effie had summoned her large round shield, but chose to leave the ancient bronze spear in the Soul Sea. While she was skilled enough to make use of it even in this narrow space, the shield would be much more formidable, especially considering her Herculean strength. Kai looked rather gloomy. Casting a mournful look over his shoulder, on the fletching of his heavy arrows, he sighed and outstretched his hand. Instead of a bow, an elegant falcata appeared in it. The beautiful curve of its blade glinted, reflecting the light. The last one to draw her weapon was Cassie. Unexpectedly, she unsheathed a slender rapier from the scabbard that was attached to her belt, and let go of it. To Sonny's surprise, the rapier did not fall to the ground, but rather stayed floating in the air, as if attached to the blind girl by an invisible string. Then it rotated slightly and hovered in front of her, with its tip pointing straight at Sonny. Pen de novel. What? Cassie smiled and turned her head to him. Please forgive Quiet Dancer. She is shy around strangers. Sonny scratched the back of his head. Sensing his confusion, Cassie explained. Dancer is an echo and a partner of mine. We work well together. As if answering her words, the rapier suddenly circled around the blind girl and returned to her previous position. It was still pointing at Sonny in a rather unfriendly way, though. All right. Interrupting their conversation, Effie called out to him. Hey, Sonny. Now would be the perfect time to invite your girlfriend to join us. The rest of the cohort stared at them with confused expressions. Sonny gritted his teeth. How many times do I have to tell you, she's not my girlfriend? Noticing the weird stares that people were giving him, he sighed. Effie! Tell them! The huntress did not even continue to tease him. Just this fact alone told Sonny how dire their situation really was. Sonny also has an echo, and a powerful one at that. Go on, summon her. He did, and a moment later, the stone saint stepped into the tunnel out of his shadow. Her ruby eyes were burning with crimson flames from behind the visor of the helmet. The taciturn monster briefly glanced at the people gathered around it, and then indifferently turned away to peer into the darkness. Just like that, their group of 6 had turned into a group of 8. Well, if a moody flying rapier could be counted to be a member. Suddenly, a distant noise made everyone freeze for a moment. With a dark expression, Effie looked in the direction it came from and sighed. Right. We've wasted enough time already. Follow me, and be ready. With that, she took a step forward and headed deeper into the tunnel. Sunny followed, commanding the stone saint to stay close to Kai and Cassie. After a while, something crunched under his foot. Looking down, he saw a bone. A human bone. What is this place? The huntress glanced back, and then answered in a somber tone. The catacombs. He frowned. Since when are there catacombs beneath the Dark City? Why have I never heard you mention them? Effie lingered before answering. The catacombs were always here. They span beneath the whole city, it's just that most of the tunnels had collapsed a long time ago. As to why hunters don't like to mention them, it's because very few are crazy enough to explore what little remains of the catacombs, and even fewer return to tell the tale. Then she added, no matter how powerful Haru's is, a person can only survive here if they know their way around. And only a couple of us, outer settlement hunters, do. So we should be able to lose him. Meanwhile, Sunny noticed more and more bones littering the ground. All of them looked like they had once belonged to humans. I don't like this. Looking up, he asked, can we get back to that thing you said about how very few people manage to escape from here alive? Why is that? The huntress grimaced. That's because... However, before she was done speaking, something appeared out of the darkness and barred their way. Sunny opened his eyes wide. Right there in front of them, a corpse was standing on the edge between light and darkness, staring at the 6 humans with the black chasms of its empty eye sockets. No, not really a corpse. A skeleton. Defying all laws of logic and physics, a creature made of nothing but human bones suddenly lunged forward, baring its teeth in a hungry grin. Chapter 194 Aching Bones. How the hell is this thing even moving? Defying all logic, the skeleton lunged at Effie with a speed that even Sunny himself wasn't capable of. With no muscle tissue connecting the bones together, the strange creature was still able to stand upright, run, and attack with vicious strength. A moment before the undead monster closed the distance between them, Effie screamed, "Stay together!" Then, she turned her torso and slammed her shield against the lunging monstrosity. With a thunderous crack, the skeleton was thrown back. Its skull and ribcage shattered, showering the tunnel with sharp bone splinters. Like a broken marionette, it fell to the ground in a shapeless pile. Sunny stared at the mess of broken bones within confusion. Wait, that's it? The huntress yelled, tearing him away from these thoughts. Don't stop, move! The cohort rushed forward, following Effie into the depths of the catacombs. When Sunny was approaching the remains of the reanimated skeleton, he noticed something that made a cold chill run down his spine. The bones were still moving, slowly assembling themselves back into the shape that resembled a human. Just as he stepped past the creature, one skeletal hand suddenly thrust in his direction, trying to claw at his leg. If not for Sunny's quick reaction, it might have succeeded in injuring him. With one slash of the midnight shard, he crushed the clawing hand and threw it away. Falling on the stones a few meters back, the hand remained motionless for a moment, and then began crawling back to the quickly recovering skeleton. The monster was being rebuilt by some terrifying, invisible force. Drawn by its unseen pull, the bones were putting themselves back together one after another. Those too damaged to be of use were simply replaced by one of the bones scattered on the floor of the tunnel. Soon, the skeleton would inevitably rise again. A disturbing thought entered Sunny's mind. He finally realized why Effie had told them to keep moving instead of trying to kill the nightmare creatures populating the catacombs. Was it because these creatures were immortal? Or rather undying? Sunny felt a sickening premonition that he was right. If so, things were going to turn from bad to harrowing pretty fast. It was at that moment that his ears caught a distant rustle coming from the darkness ahead of them. For a moment, he felt fear grip his heart, thinking that the dark sea had somehow found its way into the catacombs. But no, this wasn't the cursed sea. Instead, it was dozens, no, hundreds of skeletal feet scraping against the cold stones of the catacombs. Maybe even thousands of them. The hordes of undead monsters populating the catacombs were coming to rip the 6 humans apart. With a grimace of dark resentment on his face, Sunny gripped the midnight shard tighter and hurried after the other members of the cohort. Come and get it, bastards! Pretty soon, the undead creatures were upon them. First in ones and pairs, then in small groups, the bloodthirsty skeletons assaulted them in a constant stream. Appearing from the darkness of the catacombs, they lunged at the cohort in a whirlwind of bony claws and teeth, each bearing the same eerie skeletal grin. Effie and Nephi's, who were at the front of the group, faced the brunt of the attacks. The huntress exerted her inhuman strength, bulldozing through the skeletons like an incarnation of ancient fury. Her round shield acted as a wrecking ball, shattering the undead monsters left and right. Nephi's fought with the elegant fluidity of water, but also with the crushing force of a devastating flood. She was holding the longsword by the blade, using its cross-guard and pommel as an improvised mace. With white flames dancing in her eyes, she moved from one skeleton to another, skillfully deflecting their blows and crushing one skull after another. If anything got past them, Castor was there to deliver the finishing blow. His sword shone with a ghostly green light, slicing through bones as if without meeting any resistance. The proud legacy fought with graceful precision, always managing to immobilize the enemy with just one clean strike. The skeletons fell to his sword before even having a chance to retaliate. The 3 powerhouses made paving the path through the horde of monsters seem almost easy. However, Sunny knew that it was anything but. Each skeleton was stronger and faster than a human could ever be. It took incredible skill, resolve, and coordination to cut through their ranks without slowing down even for a second. Soon, he was forced to taste the true menace of these undead abominations for himself. Sunny, Cassie, and Kai were relatively safe at first, but with each passing minute, their situation worsened. The catacombs were a real maze. More and more often, the tunnels they were taking began to open into complicated crossroads and connect with other branching paths. When that happened, undead creatures could lunge at the cohort from the side, bypassing the impenetrable barrier of Changing Star and her 2 champions. More than that, as the number of skeletons destroyed by them increased and several minutes passed, the abominable monsters began rising back from the ground and dashing in pursuit of the party, soon attacking it from the rear. Eventually, the cohort was constantly assaulted from all sides. When Sunny first had to raise his sword to repel a straggler that lunged at him from the side tunnel, he acted with calm precision engraved into him by countless hours of practice. Slashing with the midnight shard, he cleanly beheaded the undead creature. Augmented by the shadow, his Tachi managed to cut through solid bone without that much effort. Sunny knew that losing its head won't kill the skeleton, so he instantly shifted his balance and kicked the monster in the chest, throwing it back. Although he expected that this would happen, the lack of the familiar voice whispering into his ears still unnerved him. Usually, he would have heard the announcement of the kill already. But these abominations were immortal, so the spell remained silent. Lamenting the fact that he would not be getting any shadow fragments today, Sunny moved away from the decapitated skeleton and sighed. Well, at least this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. But just a few minutes later, he bitterly regretted thinking those words aloud. Chapter 195 Rolling Battle. Once the cohort was surrounded from every side, Sunny, Cassie, and Kai had to join the battle in earnest. Sunny wasn't too worried for the blind girl and the archer because they were protected by both the Stone Saint and the Quiet Dancer. His shadow was possibly the worst enemy the bloodthirsty skeletons could face. Moving with the cold precision of an emotionless battle machine, she used both her sword and shield to deflect and destroy any enemy that dared to approach them from the sides. The graceful and devastating dance she was performing was a true sight to behold. The Quiet Dancer zipped through the air, supporting the shadow and covering any lapse left in the barrier of steel created by her. If something got past the two of them, Kai was there, using the curved blade of his falcata to crush the undead monsters, almost as if felling them with an axe. He was holding hands with Cassie, guiding the blind girl through the dark maze of the catacombs. However, it seemed as though her ability to orient herself in space had seen a considerable improvement in the past 3 months, perhaps due to the connection she shared with the flying rapier. She was now able to move quickly without using her wooden staff for support, at least. Looking at the two of them, Sunny grew somewhat sullen. Both Kai and Cassie were incredibly beautiful people. Holding hands and surrounded by nothing but darkness and monsters, with the charming young man gripping an elegant sword, they looked like an image from a book cover. They looked perfect together. Sunny, on the other hand, well, at least he had his shadow to keep him company. And the ordinary rock. However, he didn't have a lot of time to wallow in self-pity. Because his was the second most important role in this furious moving battle, holding the rear of the cohort, all by himself. Let me show you what I'm capable of. As more and more skeletons rose from the ground and attacked the party from behind, Sunny had to really exert himself. At first, he only had to fight one undead monster at a time. Despite their tremendous speed and strength, the skeletal creatures were not that hard to defeat. They seemed almost mindless, always attacking in the most straightforward way possible. Of course, a less prepared person would have been torn apart by these fierce creatures a long time ago. But Sunny was not the same weak and inexperienced kid he had been 7 months ago. The harrowing trials of the Forgotten Shore, as well as his tenacious will and grim resolve, had turned him into a fearsome creature, too. In fact, in terms of pure viciousness, the skeletons had nothing on him at all. Wrapping the midnight shard into the shadow to slice through the tough bones of the undead monsters easier, Sunny employed every bit of battle prowess he had learned from his practice with the stone saint to destroy his enemies. Seamlessly weaving the firm and unassailable movements that he had learned from the taciturn stone creature into the flowing style taught to him by Nephi's, he made short work of one skeleton after another. His blades sliced, slashed, and pierced through monster after monster, sending broken bones flying and cluttering to the ground. Of course, maintaining this state without falling behind the cohort was not easy. Sunny had never practiced fighting while on the run, especially not while moving backward. However, remembering Effie's words, he knew that being separated from the group and surrounded meant death, and thus made sure to never get too far away from his companions. At first, the situation was if not easy, then at least within the scope of his capability. Sunny even thought that this was an excellent opportunity to put everything that he had learned in the past week to practice. Despite the fact that this battle was completely different from the way he had hunted monsters before, he was doing fine. Back on the streets of the Dark City, he hunted at night, always attacking the enemy from the shadows and aiming to finish the fight with one strike. The initiative was on his side, and so he was the one dictating the flow of the combat. However, right now, things were completely reversed. Sunny was the one being attacked, with enemies suddenly appearing from the darkness and instantly lunging at him. Put on the defensive, he had to react to the enemy attacks as opposed to being the one attacking. And yet, he was managing. He had anticipated that a situation like that would inevitably happen and put enough flexibility into his technique to withstand any type of peril. He was indeed putting his lessons to practice, cementing them in his muscles and bones. After all, just like Nephi's had said, 1,000 hours of training was not as impactful as one real fight. But then, slowly, things began to change. After he had ruthlessly cut down a handful of undead abominations, suddenly, 2 attacked him at the same time. Sunny cursed and ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding having his head crushed by one of the skeletons. His sword blocked the vicious strike from the other one, and being pushed back a couple of steps by the force of the impact, he struggled to keep his balance. Not letting the monsters continue their assault unobstructed, Sunny dashed forward and twisted his body. Kicking one creature in the chest, He used it to propel himself toward the other one and put all that weight into a devastating downward slash. The skeleton crumbled into a pile of broken bones, and the edge of the midnight shard scraped against the stones, causing sparks to fly into the air. Knowing that his momentum was too strong to stop now, Sonny instead went with it, rolled over his shoulder, and got back to his feet just in time to meet the attack of the remaining monster face to face. His sword cut a sharp arc, severing both arms of the skeleton. Sonny instantly sidestepped the undead creature and delivered a low horizontal slash, breaking its legs. Making sure that the monster wouldn't be standing up any time soon by piercing its skull with the tip of the midnight shard, he hurried to catch up with the cohort. Briefly glancing at the rest of his companions, he made sure that they were not dead yet and swiftly turned around, ready to face the next monster. Then, his heart skipped a beat. Curses! 3 skeletons were rushing at him, menacing grins frozen on their skinless faces.